Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another inner hour. I appreciate it. Just invite you to take a moment to give yourself a little breather from the activities of the day or week, and just settle in for the next hour. Bring your attention present here with us. As always, I'm going to light a candle, a symbolic candle here. So we're continuing our parables study this evening. I think this is part 5, I believe. And we're going to do at least one more. We may do a couple more. As I said, there's 40 some parables. We're not going to get to all of them. Just picking ones either that I like or that I've heard people have difficulty understanding, or that seem to be especially meaningful. So you have another week or two of these, and then we'll switch to a different topic. If there's any particular ones you'd like to see me discuss that I haven't, just jot me a little note, and I will try to include them. So just take one brief pause to pay attention to that indwelling spirit within each of us and among all of us. Alrighty. So I've got 3 parables for you this evening. We'll see if we get through all of them. As always, just a reminder: at any point, you're welcome to turn on your mic and camera, get my attention, and make a comment if you'd like to share it with the group, or ask me a question if there's something that isn't clear or something that you would like more information about, and I'll see what I can do with that. So this first parable is called the parable of the 2 sons. And while you might think this is the prodigal son story, it's not. It's a different one. But it's similar in that there's 2 sons, and instead of a father, he's just called the man. But anyway, he's apparently the father, we're guessing. Anyway, so this is in Matthew 21, starts at verse 28. And Jesus is talking to a group of people. And he says, "What do you think?" As I've said before, one of the points of the parables is to get people to think. And like if I were in this situation, what would I make of it? What's the point? How can I use this in my life? Or is this something particularly pointed at me? Because sometimes they were. So this one, he actually starts out saying, "So what do you think?" Because that's what he wants them to be doing, is how do they understand this teaching? "A man had 2 sons, and he came to the first and said, 'Son, go to work today in the vineyard.' But his son replied, 'I do not want to.' But afterwards he regretted saying that, and went and worked the vineyard. The man came to his second son and said the same thing, to which the second son replied, 'I will, sir,' but he never went. Which of these 2 did the will of his father?" So whoever these people were that he's speaking to in this instance, they said, the first one, the one that refused to do it but then did. Jesus said to them, "Truly I say to you," so here's our phrase again, this is the pay attention, this is important moment. "Truly I say to you, that the tax collectors and prostitutes will get into the kingdom of God before you. So, pausing there for a moment, that's not the end of the parable, but pausing there for a moment, that was pretty radical, because number one, tax collectors in that time were Jews who voluntarily, for the most part at least, worked for the Romans, who were the hostile foreign military power that was occupying all of Israel. They voluntarily worked for them, for the Romans, collecting taxes which were exorbitant from their fellow Jews and giving them to the Romans, for which they were rather handsomely paid by the Romans. So they were making money by working for the enemy and collecting taxes from their fellow Jews to give to the Roman Empire. So they were a very hated lot. People did not want to associate with tax collectors. They despised tax collectors. It was a very unpopular occupation. And then prostitutes, of course, that kind of sex for money, or for that matter, even illicit sex outside of marriage, sex that was forbidden for whatever reason, according to any of the teachings of Moses, that was also a big no-no. And many of those transgressions, at least by the law of Moses, were punishable by death. So that's another big not okay thing. So there's these horrible tax collectors working with our enemies, and there are these horrible people engaged in illicit and forbidden immoral sex for profit. And those are the people that Jesus is saying to Jews, who we can probably assume were fairly observant, because however deep their actual religious convictions went, most of the people in this time, in this area, were observant Jews and considered themselves to be such. So I'm going to pause there for a second because Ani's hand is up. Go ahead, sweetie.
I was just going to say, um, these people are not the IRS that we think of today.
No.
Um, they're they're keeping their own records, and if they walk up and say, "You owe this much money," then you owe that much money, and they don't. It's not as though they have a set of written laws to back them up. They're, I mean, if they want to, they can extort more money from people, and it's possible that some of the more unscrupulous people would do that. We don't come up with a system where everything's written down, way past the Middle Ages. In the world. Tax collectors the world over, have not been exceedingly popular for this reason, is because whatever they said you owed, you owed. And it's not particular to this time and this area. Just wanted to throw that
No,
out.
absolutely true. And if they were cheating you, which not all of them were, but certainly many were, if they were cheating you, you were just out of luck. There was no court system you could go to. There was no way you could actually prove it, because they kept the ledgers, and even if you said, "Well, I wrote this down," big deal, didn't mean anything, because the tax collector is the one that was the authority. Um, and so, yeah, really good point. Thank you. So he's saying that these people are going to enter the kingdom of God before these regular everyday folks who were, for the most part, observant Jews. So that's not a comforting thing you want your rabbi, or any rabbi for that matter, to tell you. I'm sure that was not received well, as many of these parables that we're now used to were probably not received well at all when they were first presented. So here's the end of that
Yeah,
parable.
but I'm jumping in again because a thought occurred to me. Much like some small town where the modern day small town where the sheriff or the law enforcement is kind of a law unto themselves, it that kind of scenario would tend to attract some of the more unscrupulous people. So
Okay.
I don't think it's just the job. Like today, we shouldn't take that to mean, ooh, the IRS are bad people. That's not at all it. It's that in that time and place, it would have attracted people who were maybe out for their own ends. Okay, I'll get off
True,
tax talk.
true. Which happens in almost all positions of authority still. Uh, People who seek power in almost any arena are also likely to abuse that power once they have it. Um, that's something we'll talk about maybe another time. But yeah, that's a really good point. And back to your IRS point, not to get into that any further, but just to point out that even today, with the IRS as the example you're pointing out, there have now been plenty of evidentiary um, charges against various IRS agents and even departments in the IRS of targeting people they didn't like and doing things that were quite illegal with the power that they had over the taxation and collection and how these uh, taxes were collected and how much exactly was owed. That still actually is going on in the IRS, which has been proven in a number of instances. So again, not saying agency-wide that's true, but there are instances of that even still. So um, yeah, that's anyway. Moving on to the second half of the parable. Um, John came to you. He's talking about John the Baptist now, who was, if you remember, Yeshua's cousin, second cousin. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and prostitutes did believe him. And you, seeing all of this, do not even have any second thoughts afterwards as to whether you should have believed him. So this parable is clearly an indictment against the people he's speaking to, and that they were like the second son who said, sure, I'll do it, but doesn't. And that even upon reflection, um, with this whole parable as an example, basically saying, you still don't get it. You don't even have second thoughts about this. You totally rejected John out of hand because of the kind of people he spoke to and ministered to and the kind of people that accepted him. And yet I'm telling you, these are the people that are closer to God than you are because they're really contrite of heart and they're really sincere. And again, we don't know the particulars of the people he's speaking to, but probably, given his sort of track record in the New Testament, it would not be unreasonable to assume that these are people he considered to be hypocritical or in some way misusing their own power, and certainly people that were not exemplary in terms of the standards he was setting for his followers. So the very last line of this parable then says, therefore I say to you that the kingdom of God, he's speaking to Jews, mind you, ones who consider themselves righteous, observant Jews. Therefore I say to you, and again, he was not speaking to all Jews. He never, ever, ever criticizes the teachings of Moses, ever. He never suggests that those be put aside. He never suggests that they be abandoned or broken. He never ever talks that way about Judaism or the teachings of Moses as such. He does talk that way frequently about various Jews who are insincere or hypocritical, especially those in religious authority. So don't make the mistake of thinking Jesus was anti-Jewish. Never was. Always was an observant, devoted Jew himself. Always supported the Torah, encouraged people to support Torah, and in his own lifetime, to the very best we have, even with the archaeological records they've discovered up to today, he never took any disciples other than Jews in his lifetime. So anyway, any indictment he has against any particular Jewish person or sect of Jewish people is not an indictment against the Judaism of his day or ours. So anyway, this last thing is, therefore I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce its fruit. So he's really big on producing fruit, and that good trees produce good fruit and bad trees produce bad fruit, and that's just the way it is, and that's how you can tell a good tree from a bad tree. So if the people entrusted to the kingdom, because Jews considered themselves the chosen ones, since God had come to them through Moses at Mount Sinai and provided the Torah, a set of instructions to them, and specifically promised Abraham way before even Moses that they would be his people and they would be the light to the world, and that they were entrusted with this teaching to be a light to the world. So when Yeshua sees people not doing that, dishonoring these teachings, casting them aside, teaching others to do so, profiting in some ways from them, he's very adamant about that's not okay. Okay, so that's the parable of the two sons. The second one is probably more familiar to you. It's taught about, spoken of a great deal. It's called the Good Samaritan. This appears in Luke 10:30. And I didn't look this up, and I might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure this one does not appear in any of the other Gospels. I think this one is unique to Luke. I'm pretty sure that's right. Anyway, so Yeshua is teaching again. Yeshua says, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he encountered robbers on the road. They stripped him and beat him and went away, leaving him almost dead. So now here's somebody who's a victim of violent crime. I'd like to say that's unfamiliar to us in these days, but it certainly is not. By coincidence, a priest, now when he says a priest, he does not mean a Catholic priest, because there was no Catholicism or any churches or any Christianity. He means a Jewish priest, a Kohen. By coincidence, a Jewish priest was going down that same road, and he saw this man and walked to the other side to pass him by. So here's now the person who's the religious authority in Israel, the spiritual authority in Israel, the priesthood, out of whom we should be expecting the most spiritual awareness and behavior. This guy sees a person on the road who is a Jew, as is the priest, and goes out of his way to avoid him and leave him there. That should be not uncommon either. Hopefully it's uncommon in your experience, but if you watch any news, it is a very common thing, sadly, all over the world, including this country, for victims of violent crime to have other people standing around while it's happening to them and do nothing to help them, including even testifying to the police later as a witness, because they don't want to get involved. What you often see these days in victims of violent crime is nobody helping them, nobody calling the police, but everybody filming it and then walking away. So things haven't changed much. Anyway, then a bit later, a Levite, who were the group of people by tribe that served in the temple. They were not priests themselves, but they served the priesthood and they served in the temple. So again, very holy people that you would expect very spiritual behavior out of. A Levite came to that place and saw this man. So here's this guy beaten and dying on the ground, and also passed him by on the other side of the road. 2 out of 2 now of the holy people didn't extend a hand to help him. Then a Samaritan who was upon a journey, because they were not in Samaria, which was a different land. Then a Samaritan who was upon a journey came upon this man, and when he saw him, he felt great compassion for him. He came over to the man and bound up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. The wine, because it was alcohol, as a disinfectant, and the oil as a olive oil still. I don't know if you know, this is a powerful healing agent. And then put him upon his own animal and brought him to the nearest inn and paid them to take care of him. That next day, so he's now stayed at the inn with this man overnight, he took out 2 denarii, which is a unit of money back then, and gave them to the innkeeper and said, take care of this man, and whatever more you need to spend to take care of him, when I return, I will repay it to you in full. So he's paying for this guy's complete care. I'm going to stop there for a moment in the parable. At that time, the Samaritans, who, by the way, as a race and a people, were also Jews, but they lived in a different country, separate from Israel, called Samaria. It was nearby. They also were aware of and had the Torah. They worshipped on a mountain called Mount Gerizim instead of on Mount Zion or Zion. And the Samaritan Jews and the Zionist Jews, if we can put it that way, these 2 groups of Jews, the Jews who worshipped in Jerusalem and in southern Israel, and the Jews who worshipped in the section called Samaria, did not like each other. There was intense animosity between these 2 groups of people. If they had not been the same race, we would have called it a racial prejudice and animosity. It's not unlike the apartheid we saw in South Africa, or maybe the reverse apartheid, if you want to think of it that way, going on now in South Africa. The black and white thing in this country, the black and police thing in this country, the Irish and Protestant thing in Ireland. You name it. We see plenty of these things in our world still. Groups that, for example, the Irish and the Protestants in Ireland, the Catholics and the Protestants in Ireland, both are Christian. Both are supposedly following Jesus. Both are supposedly worshiping the same God. And they hate each other and are killing each other. So here we have the Samaritans and the Jews, pretty much in the same situation. And there was violence, not always, but it was common to have violence between these 2 groups of people when they clashed, and certainly at least verbal violence and mild physical encounters when they came upon each other on the road or in various places. So they kind of stayed out of each other's area. Even when they were traveling, Jesus avoided Samaria for the most part. The disciples never wanted to go into Samaria, although later he does cross through that with them. And so these are the bad guys. These are the bad guys. These are the way many people felt about Muslims after 9/11 in this country, the way many people feel about the way one Muslim group feels about a different Muslim group. That whole scenario. This was a very contentious group. And to the Jews that Jesus was working with, the temple Jews of Jerusalem, the Jews of southern Israel, even the Jews of Galilee for that matter, none of them liked the Samaritans and vice versa. They were the bad guys. So now Jesus is telling a story to the good guy Jews about this poor guy who's set upon by robbers and left half dead. And a Jewish priest comes along and won't help him. And a Jewish Levite comes along and won't help him. And a Samaritan, this horrible, awful, terrible Samaritan that we would be better if they never lived or if they died off or if they went away. These are terrible people. This Samaritan is the hero of his story. So the rest of the story, and I'll come back to that. Yeshua is now speaking to his listeners. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a good neighbor to the man who was fell upon by robbers? And if they answered him, it's not recorded in here. It goes, the next sentence says, then Yeshua said, the one who showed, I'm sorry, I misspoke. In this particular version, yes, a different person says, the one who showed compassion, one person said the man who showed compassion to him. And Yeshua said to him, go and do the same. So the point of this parable was that people deserve our compassion and that he, Yeshua, is expecting his fellow Jews to act compassionately, not just to each other, definitely that too, but not just to each other, but even to people they don't like and don't get along with. that they're expected to extend compassion. That's a theme that's throughout his teaching, even when he's in private with his apostles. And at one point tells them, well, so what if you love people who are just like you and love you back? Everybody can do that. That's no big deal. I want to see you love people that don't like you and that you don't get along with. And I want you to pray for your enemies. That's the kind of love I'm talking about. So this is another example of that, the so-called Good Samaritan story. And to us, it's not that big a deal. It's just three people. There's a priest and a Levite and a Samaritan. And to us, especially those of us raised Christian, those are kind of nebulous terms. We don't really know what that means. Who are these guys? And so it doesn't mean anything. To the Jewish listeners in first century, this would have been shocking. I mean, like really shocking. This would have been like, making somebody from a violent group here in our country the hero of a story that saves people that we love, as opposed to murdering them or raping them or torturing them or something. They turn out to be the good guy and save somebody we care about. It was a very outrageous parable in the time that he told it, which may or may not be why it doesn't appear everywhere. I don't know, or maybe Luke had just heard it because he wrote much later on. Maybe he'd heard that story at that point. Maybe it was something Jesus did. Maybe it was not even one he ever told. We don't know. But certainly it's in keeping with his teachings. All right, so we're going to have time to get to the third one. So the third one is called the prodigal son. Sometimes it's referred to as the lost son. And this is also in Luke. And it's in Luke 15:11. This is a section, this whole section of Luke, there's a number of parables in here, some of which appear in the other Gospels, some of which don't. Yeshua said, a man had two sons. So here we're starting off with a father and two sons again. The younger son said to the father, give me my share of inheritance and what is coming to me now. And so the father divided his wealth between the two sons. Not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey to a distant country. And there he squandered his entire estate in wild living. Now, once he had spent everything of his inheritance, pardon me, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began, like others, to do without. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that far country, who sent him into the field to feed his pigs. This man longed to have his fill of carob pods that the pigs were eating. He was so hungry he wanted the pig food. Carob pod, by the way, some of you probably know this, but carob pod is also called locust or locust pod in the New Testament. It doesn't mean locust the grasshopper. It means the carob bean out of which we make carob stuff. That's sort of like a chocolate substitute. But no one would give him, the man, anything. Eventually he came to his senses and he said, how many of my father's hired laborers have more than enough bread and food to eat, and I'm here dying of hunger? I will set out and go back to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and I have sinned in your sight. I realize I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Please treat me as one of your hired laborers. Because he's so hungry. He's willing to be a slave just to work. Just to be able to be fed. So he set out toward his father. When he was still a long way off from his father's house, his father saw him, felt compassion for him, and ran out to him, embracing him and kissing him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and am not worthy to be called your son. But the father said to one of his slaves, "Quickly, quickly, bring out my best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and bring the fatted calf and slaughter it, that we may all eat and celebrate together. For this my son was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found." And they did so, and they began to celebrate. Now you might think that's the end of the parable if you hadn't heard it before, but it's still not. There's more. So here's the rest of it. Now the older son was still in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. And he summoned one of the servants and began inquiring what these things meant. And the servant told him, "Your brother has come back, and your father has slaughtered the fatted calf, because he has received your brother back safe and sound." This son then became very angry and was unwilling to go into the house. So his father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father angrily and said, "Look, for years I have been serving you, and I have never neglected one command of yours, and yet you never gave me so much as a young goat that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, the one who has stolen and devoured all your wealth and spent it on prostitutes, you slaughter the fatted calf for him." The father then said, "Son, you have always been with me, and everything that I have is yours. But we must celebrate and rejoice, because this is your brother. He was dead and has been brought to life again. He was lost and is now found." So that's the prodigal son story. And typically in that story, the way it's usually presented that I've seen in most Christian circles, the son who left was the bad son, and the son who stayed was the good son. But there's a different way of looking at it, which is more likely how it would have been looked at in the time. So, first of all, sons inherited from their father, and the oldest son inherited first. They got the blessing from the father, they got the authority of the father, they took over the family, they got the estate of the father. If there were twins, they shared it. Some of it would go down to the younger son, or in some cases not pass to that son at all, and in some cases not pass unless the brother died. There are a lot of complex rules about all of that, but it went to the older son. And neither of them, however many sons there were, none of them got it until the father died. So when this son comes to his father and says that he wants his inheritance now, because that was unheard of, what he's really saying is, "I wish you were dead, because I want all your stuff." So not exactly a loving relationship there with his father to start with. But the father went ahead and did that and divided the wealth between the two sons. So this is something that's a little bit missed when people talk about the parable, that would not have been missed, I think, by first century Jews listening to this, is that the older son, the one who stayed there, did not say, "That's okay, Dad, you keep my part of that for now. I'm happy to get that once you pass. You hang on to that." He took it. They both took it. They both took what they were not due, what they did not deserve, and what was not time for them to have. Both of them took it. So that's not great either. And the first son stays there with the other son gone. But he stays there in light of having taken his share already. He just doesn't leave with it like the younger son did. So it's not unreasonable that first century listeners would have assumed this son was staying there, having already taken his father's inheritance, which he didn't deserve yet, having already taken that, And now his brother's out of the picture altogether, and maybe never, and presumably never coming back because of the way he left, and he took everything with him. So now this other brother gets all his half already and stays there with his other brother out of the picture thinking, and I get all this. I get the house and the fields and the farm and the animals. That's awesome. I get all this already. So he was greedy too. He wasn't, if he was staying there because he loved his father, he'd be saying, I don't want any of that. I just want to be with you. And whatever's left over when you're gone, whatever comes to me, that's fine. Um, but he wanted that now and took it. And there's no evidence here that he's deeply compassionate toward or deeply devoted to his father. His staying there is not an evidence of devotion. If he's staying there so that he has claim on it and his brother doesn't, if he ever comes back. And so we'll come back to that part. So this younger brother goes off, has this wild life of things that he wants to do, splurging on stuff. By the way, do you know that most lottery winners, big lottery winners, the big mega lottery winners, that most of them within 2 years are broke again or back to the level that they were before they had it? And many of them experience severe depression, and some commit suicide because they have all this that they want and they go crazy, just like this story. Anyway, statistically, that's sadly true. Huge lottery winners because they track all that stuff. Anyway, he's so depressed and so hungry that he decides to come back to his father.
So, Stephen,
Yes, please go ahead.
having thrown that out and made the comparison, could you expound on that a little? I mean, maybe you're just assuming we're getting the point, but so what is that saying about we get everything we want, like this first son, or the second son rather, and the lottery winner? So what is that saying about us spiritually and world in a worldly sense too?
Yeah. Well, for me, what I've noticed in myself and in people around me for a long time is that we all have things we want. We have these desires. We want, if we have $20,000, we think, boy, if I had $100,000, I wouldn't have any worries. Everything, my life would be just hunky-dory. If we have $100,000, we think, oh my God, if I had $500,000, then I could relax and I'd have enough. If we have $500,000, we think, well, if I had $1 million, then I wouldn't have to worry about my retirement, I'd have enough. Well, if I have $1 million, you get the point. We never have enough. We always think that we need more than we have, and that we won't be happy until we have more than we have. And at some point, there's this mythological figure or number or circumstance that if we could just get to that circumstance or to that number, then we could relax and actually enjoy our life and be kind to everybody and patient with everybody and helpful to everybody, because now we've gotten the circumstance, whatever it is, the house, the money, the job, the retirement funds, whatever it is we want, the relationships. Now we got what we want. So now we're going to be happy and we're going to be good people. And that's really almost never the way it works. There are exceptions. But if you think, because that whole attitude of give me more, I want more, this isn't enough, I want more, and throwing fits, so to speak, until we get more, is a very childish attitude. And if you have a child who behaves like that, and you indulge that child, and they get whatever they want, and when they don't get what they want, they become obnoxious. And so to stop them from being obnoxious, instead of them having consequences for behaving that way, you give them what they want to shut them up and stop them from being obnoxious and bothering you. That child is actually miserable, even though they're getting everything they want. They're very unhappy children and very angry children. And the less we set limits on children, the angrier and more hostile they become and the more upset they are. And that's true of us as adults also. That just continues. People that I personally have known that have really gotten what they wanted, whether somebody, in many different ways it occurs, but all of a sudden they have no accountability to anyone. They have enough money to do whatever they want and to buy compliance from anybody that they want. And there's nobody keeping them in check. There's nobody challenging them, nobody saying no to them, nobody calling them to account for things. There's no consequences for their speech or behavior. We often think that the freedom we want is the freedom to just do whatever we want. I'd like to have enough money to be free to do whatever I want. I'd like to have enough social standing to not have to worry about what people think about me and say whatever I want to my boss or my coworkers or my neighbors or my church or my synagogue. I just like this freedom to be me all the time, wherever I want, however I want to. And in the sense I'm talking about it, that translates into I want my whims to be indulged at all times with no consequences to me. And God forbid you get that. Because if you do, you're going to turn out like this. And unless you're extremely lucky or extremely rare person. Self-indulgence does not lead to happiness and peace. If the self we're talking about is this human, emotional, reactive creature that we all are, we have that part of us. If we're talking about indulging the soul, indulging the divine self, indulging the spirit in us, which is kind of a weird way to talk about it, but if you want to put it in those terms, that's a great thing to do, because that spirit in you is concerned about your well-being, but not your well-being alone. That spirit in you, because it's in everyone, is concerned about the well-being of everyone. Whereas my personal, emotional, I want this, you don't factor into that. This is all about me. Me, 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 me. And I want me, whatever I want, whatever me wants, me should get. That is the kind of self-indulgence I'm talking about. And it does not lead to our happiness, even though we often think it will. And I think that's part of what this story is about, is that people who have that don't, as a rule, don't fare well. People who do have to make an effort, people who have to admit their failures, people who have to own up to their consequences of their speech and actions, people who have to learn to mature, people who have to take others into consideration, people who learn how to genuinely feel compassion for people, who genuinely learn how to apologize and try to make amends. Those are people who can live meaningful, fulfilling, and contented lives. Not perfect lives, but good lives. So, is that what you were? I mean, does that kind of address what you were
That,
asking me?
that, that's part of it, yeah. And I mean, I like that you're giving us the background and whatever, but I like also the spiritual connotation in it, just not assuming we get it.
Okay.
I don't always.
All right.
No, I don't know how to get a hand up anymore.
Oh, just go ahead, Eunice. I hear you.
Just click the mute, unmute.
You're
button.
unmuted right now.
I
You're
did.
good.
Hello.
You're good. We can hear you.
Okay. It reminds me of there's a line in an old John Denver song, and it's kind of hidden in the song, but it says, "When things are what you're looking for, there's never quite enough."
Yes. Yes. That's a good one. Thank you for the reminder. Yeah, John was. Yeah, thank you so much. I forgot. I haven't listened to that song in ages. Thank you. Good one.
Me neither, but it just, there's a real truth to it,
Hmm.
but it's not the main emphasis of the song, but it's a little thing that,
Hmm.
good line that's thrown in it.
Yeah, no kidding. It's great. Thank you for bringing that up. So just to finish this off here, so when the son actually and this whole story, by the way, is about a central biblical theme called tshuva in Hebrew, usually translated as repentance in English. But the idea is to come back, to turn around, literally to turn around, to face the other way, or to return. Sometimes it's translated as return. And the idea is, in the beginning of the Bible, in the first 2 chapters, where everything's created, including us, everything's beautiful and wonderful, and God says good. And mankind, even once it's placed in the garden, there's everything they need. It's provided. It's a blissful kind of paradisical state. And by the 3rd chapter, things all fall apart because of man's refusal to do what God has asked and insist on his own way. And everything kind of falls apart. And then the so-called fall of man. And then the rest of the Bible, people are in this state of separation and dual consciousness and worlds of polarity and life and death and good and bad, light and dark, and that whole struggle until the end. Well, at the end of Torah, Moses dies, and we have enough teachings apparently to move on. And then in the Christian Bible, the New Testament comes along, and Jesus brings more teaching, which hopefully is enough. And by the book of Revelation at the end, supposedly there's a new heaven and a new earth and everything's set right and things are back restored, back to kind of the Eden state. So that coming back into direct relationship with God again, leaving the worlds of duality and coming back into the oneness again. All these different ways we rephrase it, going home, going to the kingdom of heaven, all these different ways we try to describe it. And all the metaphors that are used are really about reorienting our life centered around God instead of the ego. And at least that's my kind of summation of it. So this story is very much that same thing also. This son's ego was driving him, and his lusts and his greed and his desires, and he got to play those out. And they ended disastrously, as they usually do. But with the realization that that isn't really what he wanted. He was happy in his father's house, and he had what he needed, and he was at peace there. So he wanted to find a way to come back to that. And he was willing to come back even just to serve him, not as a son. But as soon as he's turned around and is walking back toward the Father, so if we think of this in terms of us feeling estranged from God, however you conceive God, you're feeling estranged from that and making an effort to turn around and reconnect again, whether it's momentarily or whether it's after years. That effort to reconnect, God always responds to that. And God doesn't just wait somewhere for us to make that ultimate return. God immediately comes to us as soon as there's the desire to return. So in the prodigal's turning and starting back on the road to his father, he runs down the road to greet him and hugs him and brings him home and has this big celebration. Remember the parable of the lost sheep that I told you about the rejoicing in heaven among the angels of this one who has returned, even more so than the 99 who never left. That's a big thing in Jewish teachings, especially Jewish mystical teachings, the Kabbalah, about the one who returns being even more spiritually celebrated than the one who never left. There's a lot to that. Maybe we'll go into that in more depth some other time, but this is a story about that return. And then the son who stayed and is angry that his brother's getting the attention because he never left, and so the brother doesn't deserve anything, which would also kind of go along with the idea, unstated idea, that if he already had taken his share of the inheritance and was glad to have his brother out of the picture, so then he got the house and the farms and the animals and everything else, and now his brother's back and has claim on those, it kind of lends support to that he might have had that attitude all along with him being so upset, as opposed to, oh, thank God my brother's back. Well, now what's he going to take that's mine? So he may have had that kind of subtle attitude all along. But his father, again, when the son won't come into the house, the father goes to him. So once again, the Father, God, is making an effort to come to us when we're seeking that connection. And even when we're resisting it, when we're in our little tantrum phase, I'm not going in, and my brother shouldn't have this, and we're all upset. that same God, that same Father, that same Spirit will come to us and try to soothe us and make amends to us and help us realize. You notice the Father doesn't say, gee, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, you're right, I overreacted. I'm sorry I'm celebrating your brother's return. I'm sorry I'm having this big celebration for him. Oh, gee, I'm wrong. Can you please forgive me? I made a mistake. He doesn't apologize to him at all because he has done nothing wrong. He's helping him to realize why it's happening this way. That his son, your brother, was as good as dead. And he's come back to life spiritually. He's come back to our family. He was lost, and now he's found again. That's worth embracing and celebrating. We don't have to get along with somebody all the time to love them. We don't have to care about somebody. I mean, we don't have to like somebody to feel compassion for their suffering and to be glad when that suffering ends. Some of you, I hope not many of you, but some of you may have estrangement in your own families. Certainly it's something I've experienced. And if you have someone, especially, God forbid, a child of yours, like this son, who's kind of spit in your face, so to speak, and then gone off into the wild country to just live a debauched life and wants nothing to do with you, that's heartbreaking. And in any way the estrangement occurs, it's heartbreaking. Whether it's between siblings, because that's not uncommon, even still in our world. Between parent and child, that's not uncommon in our world. So the likelihood is that maybe some of you have experienced that. I hope not. But if you have, I can tell you it's really painful. And if that should turn around, however it should turn around, however that comes about, if at some point that estrangement ends and that person wants to come back and reconnect and be part of the family again, I mean, that's what a thing to celebrate. I mean, how would you feel if that estrangement ended and those people that wanted nothing to do with you and had nothing but bad things to say about you suddenly realized your value and wanted to be part of your life again? That would be an awesome experience, which is what the father's experiencing, and which the brother could have experienced. This brother, the story could have said, and when the brother who stayed saw his father returning with his younger brother, he was so excited and his heart rejoiced and the spirit leapt up in him and he ran and embraced his brother and cried tears of joy and helped to prepare the feast. He could have done that. That's not the way the parable goes. So it's not just the younger brother who had issues in this story. They both did. And I think that would have been more obvious in the time of its hearing than it is to us now, centuries later. But I think there's a lot of important features in that story, and you'll notice both of those, the story of the two sons, the one who said he would work and didn't, and the one who didn't want to but did, and the Good Samaritan. There's some similar thematic themes, which is why I picked to do all three of those tonight. In all of those, about the unexpected nature of them and who really is doing the will of God in the bigger metaphorical picture. Who is it that's really doing the will of God? The people that talk about it, the people that say they'll do it, or the people that really do it? The people that talk about forgiveness, are they the holy people, or the ones who forgive being really hurt? Are they the holy people? Are the ones who talk about how we should accept everybody and love everybody and be kind to everybody, accept these people because they're terrible, and accept that guy because he cheated me one time, accept this person because she said mean stuff to me and I'm never going to let her forget that, accept them? Are they the holy people, or are the ones who actually forgive that? The ones who actually extend compassion, even at expense to themselves, like this man paying the innkeeper to pay for a perfect stranger. I mean, think about that. How likely are people today even to pay for the care of a perfect stranger just because they've happened to see them in bad straits? So it's a pretty extraordinary, these are pretty extraordinary stories. and and probably were difficult for the hearers to take in, and probably did set them to thinking of, so, what would I do in this story? If I were the brother that stayed home, what would my reaction be? If I were the brother that left, what might that feel like to be welcomed back after creating such a hurtful fiasco in my leaving? If I were the son who didn't want to do the work but did, or the son who said, sure, Dad, I'd be happy to, but then won't, who am I in this story? And what? And am I in this story right now? Am I being told this parable because I'm in this story right now and need to make a decision about how I'm going to respond to it? So anyway, that's the ones for this evening. I hope you found something valuable in those. I want to wrap up here in just a moment, but I want to make just a couple of announcements. 3 actually, unless Ani can remind me of others I've forgotten. One is that next Friday, a week from tonight, the 20th, I have another obligation. There will not be an inner hour next Friday. So maybe study a parable on your own, talk about it with your spouse or your friends and see what you come up with. I will continue this parable series at least one more week. We probably will do 2 more, unless I get a bunch of suggestions, and maybe it'll go longer. But no inner hour at all next week because I have another obligation and will not be here. And then we start up again the week after that, which should be the 27th of June, will be another parable one, and then probably one more in July on parables, unless I get a lot of response wanting more. And then we'll move on to another series after that. The second thing is that tomorrow is our 1-by-1 gathering at Kathy Stark's house. For those who are in the area, some of you I know are coming to that. And I believe, Ani, you can correct me if I'm mistaken, but I believe even at the last minute, if you forgot about it, suddenly can come and couldn't before, I think there's still room for a couple of people. Is that
There is room, but I would need to know that.
tonight?
Oh, yeah, I will. I won't check email tonight. Okay, I'll tell you what, you can send Stephen a text message
All right.
and we'll check it tomorrow. We won't look at it tonight, but if you can come, we do have 3 spots, I think. Two
Okay.
spots, 2 spots
Yeah,
for sure.
Okay, I think it's let's say 2. So do let me, if you can come, that would be great. But do let me know, text me, and I will confirm with you when I get it. And if we get more than 2, then I'll just take them in order. The last one I get, I'll let you know you're on a waiting list, unless Kathy can squeak you in somehow. But anyway.
So Shuli and Nahama and Trisha, you could all make reservations and get here in time. Kidding.
That'd be delightful. Everybody would love to see you.
That's the only announcement I had.
Okay, and then my last one is I'm also the guest speaker at Unity here in Fort Wayne this Sunday, so you are certainly welcome to stop in at that if you'd like.
We would love to be there, and we won't be able to. Oh, and you'd love it. It's raining, storming here every week.
Oh,
We're having some rain here too.
you would have been okay here, Shuli, because it's been a very gentle rain here. A nice soft, no thunderstorm, no lightning, no winds, just a very gentle, nice garden rain.
It's been storming here. We even had some heat lightning yesterday.
Oh, wow. Well,
Thank you. Right up Auntie's alley, except for the humidity. She'd absolutely hate it.
that's true. That's true. Well,
So it's all up to you. Make that flight. Come on, let us know when to pick you up at the airport.
Not yet. Not yet. We'd love to, and not yet.
Gotcha. Hey, Trish, I didn't hear what you say. Go ahead, sweetie.
Oh, I said ditto for me. I would love to be there too. I need to get to, Harry Potter's firebolt.
There you go. Sounds good. Yeah.
Big hugs, everybody.
Maybe we can get you one of those. Maybe we can get you one of those Nimbus 2000 brooms, and you can just zip over here real quick on it.
That's it. That's exactly what I'm thinking of. Great.
Great.
I think you should apparate instead. That's
Oh,
a
that's a great
long trip on that is a way long trip on a broomstick.
See, it's been so.
I haven't found the port key.
Yeah, same.
All right, I'm gonna have to go back and read that series. It's been too long.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yes. Well, big hugs, everyone. Thank you.
likewise, love you all. And thanks for joining me tonight. And I'll miss you next Friday, but I'll be doing some good things with some other folks, and see you on the 27th, I hope. So,
Okay.
or this weekend for those of you here in town. All right, love you all. Good night.
Good night.